Well, hi, and welcome back to Will Henry's Workshop, where I endeavor to show that just because you're old, it doesn't mean you're incapable, except that sometimes it does. Like, for instance, when I taped the entire chambering of this Remington barrel without turning the microphone on. This happens now and then, so sometimes we are incapable. But anyway, we weren't incapable of rechambering this Remington barrel. Now, as you recall, my intent was to repurpose this barrel and put it on this pre-war Model 70. Now, normally that would have been a pretty straightforward operation, but as it turned out, this chamber was a little bit eccentric in relation to the bore, so I set it back 5/8 of an inch. And then I bored out the old throat and neck in an attempt to straighten this out. I also bored at the back of the chamber on the taper just to at least have an indicator of if it was running true or not. Well, it worked out beautifully. The chamber now is perfectly concentric. The throat is perfectly concentric. And I can tell that because this throater barely cuts over 0.264, so that all it does really is remove the lands. On here, there's no sign of it cutting more on one side than the other, and you'd be able to see that if it did, even by a couple 10,000ths. So anyway, it seems very straight. The headspace is the same as my other 6.5 Creedmoor barrels, so that should be good. Now you'll see I've cut the cone breech. Let me, John, you can see that instead of me. So I've cut the cone breech. On the Model 70, the cone breech is actually more like 42 degrees rather than 45, so I set the compound at 42 and cut this breech. Again, I put the bolt in the receiver and screw it on and check the gap with a feeler gauge so I know how far to cut, how much further to move to cut my cone to the correct depth, and there it is. So it's all done. The chamber, see if I can get that where you can see. Chamber finished nicely. It's smooth and, as I said, concentric. So the next step is, just as with the Kimbers that I've been doing, back you up a little there. So just like with the Kimbers, the next step is to make the extractor cut. So to do that, I'll tighten the receiver on here good and tight and mark it, and then I'll set up the palm grin attachment just as I did before with the Kimbers. The difference being with the Model 70, here's another barrel for that same action. With the Model 70, the slot is angled back, and so you just have to pivot the milling attachment a little bit to accomplish that, and perhaps I'll show you that. For now, I'm going to pause you while I screw this barrel on and get ready to make that cut. Okay, I've tightened this up on the barrel, and I tighten it up real tight when I'm going to cut an extractor cut, because you definitely don't want to have it a little bit loose, and then after you put it on and take it off a couple of times, it's sloppy. So anyway, I tighten it up real tight. Now I use an outside wrench on Model 70s, which clamps on the flat bottom and over the receiver ring. And when I do that on the Model 70 or a Mazda or anything else I'll use that outside wrench on, I put a mandrel in the receiver so that it supports the front, and it's a close fit in there. So it supports the front of the receiver ring, so that if I do tighten this a little too much, it doesn't squash the receiver ring, and it's not distorted from the effort of tightening or loosening or whatever. So that's kind of important, especially on Model 70s and on small ring Mausers, because that sidewall isn't very thick and it's possible to distort your receiver if you're not careful. So but for now, that part's done. So now I'll just mark my extractor cut. This is just a piece of flat bar which has been sharpened and then case hardened on the end so that I can mark the breech end of the barrel. And once I get my hammer, I can mark the breech end of the barrel so I know where the extractor goes. Then on the off side, I'll make a little mark too on the bottom, just to help with alignment when I'm setting the thing up in the vise. Anyway, and there it is. Slip the mandrel back in there, put the wrench back on. Put the wrench the other way this time because I'm going to have to hit it to break loose. Go. So now I'll set that up in the palm grin and get ready to cut the slot. So there you go. It's I set that up in the palm grin attachment, and now the extractor cut on the Model 70 is cut at an angle of about 25 degrees, so I just swiveled that attachment around the 25 degrees, and then with the 3/8 cutter in the 3-jaw chuck, I just made my cut and then widened it out on either side to bring it up to 410, which is what the Winchester factory cut is. So that's it. Now it's not quite done because the cut on the factory barrel is actually convex. and mine is flat. So I'll finish it off by hand with a file, and I don't mind doing that, but it is a bit of a time additive. Now, on the newer Model 70s, they changed the shape of their extractor somewhat, and now they make a straight cut, just like the Kimber. And this is just strictly for ease of manufacturing. Setup and everything is easier for them as well. So there we go. Just can't find that errant controller. And I'm going to pause you once. So there you are, unceremoniously yanked across the room again. But there you can see the finished Model 70 extractor cut. It's got the convex surface, which I just filed in with a needle file, and Bob's your uncle. So now I'll put this rifle together, and in the next segment we'll take it up to the range here and try it out and see if the darn thing works. Well, back again, and you have no way of knowing it unless I tell you, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyway. This is take 2, and you'd never guess why. Yep, I forgot to turn on the damn microphone again. Anyway, it's on now. And another thing you wouldn't know is that during that brief intermission, I was actually gone for 2 weeks. But I'm back now, and we'll finish putting together this Model 70 with the Remington barrel and 6.5 Creedmoor. When I had screwed the barrel on, I'd mentioned that I put these on really tight, and by really tight I meant I turn them on as tight as I can with my outside wrench. Then I give it a couple of swats with a 6-pound piece of bar stock to seat it real tightly, and that way when I then mark the extractor cut and make the cut, when I turn it back on, I'm not going to go past. In fact, I have to work to get it back up to there. So I know that I'm not going to go too far and not have my extractor cut line up. Now, speaking of the extractor cut lining up, with the Model 70, the pre-64 Model 70s, the extractor cut, as I'd mentioned before, is angled away from the chamber, and the front of the extractor also has a bevel on it that kind of matches that angle. And occasionally you'll see a Model 70 where that extractor is actually contacting the slope of the extractor cut. You don't want that. You want to be sure that you have clearance on the nose of the extractor so that when you close the bolt, the extractor isn't being pushed out by that cut. If it is, it'll deflect the front of the bolt and you'll have a misalignment there. And I've seen rifles like that where the cut was made too short and the extractor was actually being pushed out by the cut, and they didn't shoot well. Freeing that up restored, well, I wouldn't say restored, resulted in the accuracy that it should have had in the first place. So anyway, that's just an important thing. People that are familiar with Model 70s probably knew that already, but those that didn't, there you have it for what it's worth. Now, so now I've got the barrel on, and so it's just a matter of installing the stock. Now this stock, it's a prone stock, kind of a Marksman style. And I got these laminated, I got them as blanks, un-inletted, so that I could fit them to whatever. And I got these from Richard's Microfit years ago. And so that's what I put on here. When I do these, when I glass bed them, I drill, for pillars, I drill a hole clear through the stock, from top to bottom, and at the front a 5/8 inch hole. And I cast a fiberglass pillar in that hole. And I do the same thing at the rear, but on the Model 70, it's only a 9/16 hole at the rear because that's all the coverage I have with the tang and the trigger guard. For the center screw, you have a choice with the Model 70. You can either clear that so that there's no contact, and that's maybe the easier way to do it, or you can bed it. And if you do bed it, you can't put an awful lot of torque on that because there's not a lot of surface, but you can put some. And otherwise, and in this case too, the primary purpose of that center screw is to hold the trigger guard in place. But like I said, I bedded this one, and I kind of like bedding the center screw because I figure it kind of lends integrity to the whole system. Whether it does or not, I don't know. But as long as it's a good level bed, it should be fine. And on this receiver, when I first started working with it, one thing I do is I file the bottom and polish it and check it with a straight edge so that it's perfectly level and straight and smooth, so that it fits well in there. And anyway, there it is. Now this barrel, or this stock, has had a half a dozen different barrels in it, so the barrel channel is made amply large for the largest one. And there you go. Let's see here. Now, a lot of guys advocate the use of torque wrenches. A lot of guys like to use torque wrenches, I think, as much as anything, so that they can quantify the amount of torque that they're putting on the screws. For myself, I've always just kind of gone with the farmer method. And, so to torque the screws up the way I like them, the front screw gets tightened up pretty damn tight because it's got a lot of surface there. The center screw is kind of just past snug, and the rear screw I tighten up just a little more than the center one, but and there again, a pretty arbitrary way of doing it, and no quantification there. So anyway, let's see if we can. This is the is the finished product. If I can get it to hold still. There we go. Put the bolt in. Oh, and on the bolt, I was going to show you, if I haven't already, I put dovetailed inserts at the rear of the bolt, and the purpose of those is that, and they're in line with the locking lugs, so that they have no effect until the bolt's turned down. But when the bolt's turned down in the receiver, these two inserts, which are slightly proud of the bolt body, these two lumps, then center the bolt up in the receiver bridge so that there's no deflection of the rear of the bolt through contact with the sear. And so you can see after the bolt's been put in there, well, it just touches enough to barely start to take the black off of there. At this point, it's probably got about 1/1000th of clearance total, so a half a thou per side, and so that when the bolt is closed, it doesn't move up and down at all. And again, just how much effect that has on accuracy, I don't know, but it's something that makes me feel good. And so there you have it. And so the scope is just an old 6 to 24 weaver, held in a cheap pair of rings of unknown origin, and nothing special, but they do hold the scope, and it works out okay. So there we have it. So in the next video, as I mentioned before, in the next video, I'm going to take this up along with a couple of hunting rifles that I have to sight in and up to the range, and we'll see how it works. It should work very well because, like I say, the barrel looks good. The chamber is now concentric. Everything's straight. Looks great. So we'll see how it works out. And I'll fire it off the bench to start with, and then if I can get rigged up at the range, I might shoot some prone. I notice I've got a lot of grass growing up there, so whether or not I'm going to shoot prone kind of depends on whether or not I feel like mowing grass. So we'll see. But anyway, so when we get up there, we'll find out. And until then, this is again Will Henry, out.